Okay, how you can go from running 25 minutes for 5K to running 15 minutes for 5K. I'm going to talk to you about real life example. I'm going to talk to you about mindset versus physical limits and how they are connected and what you can do to get the very most out of your body right now so that you can think of your training in a much better way in order to make big improvements. And that's the big point. If you're making improvements, you get excited, you're enthusiastic about your running journey. You might be re-enthusiastic about it if you've plateaued recently, but those gains are still possible for you. Now, I had this in the comments below from Dave.
The mindset shift is probably as big as the physical shift. I thought my race pace was around 4 minutes per kilometer until I started smashing intervals at 3 minutes to 3 minutes 20 per kilometer. It's completely shifted my view of what I can actually achieve.
Now, Dave didn't start at 4-minute race pace per kilometer. He's not started with a 20-minute 5K or with a 40-minute 10K. He's had to come from far away in order to build to that 4 minutes. And then he's inserted interval training, and he's now running intervals in 3:20 per kilometer and 3 minutes per kilometer. What do you think that does to his mindset in terms of his thinking about what is now possible? I would be thinking, well, surely I can hold a marathon distance for 4 minutes now that I can be running kilometers in 3 minutes, 3:20. Surely I can hold that 5K pace of 4 minutes or that 10K pace of 40 minutes. Surely I can hold that for a marathon. All of a sudden that door is open and you're not going to stop there. For the 5K, if I can run a kilometer in 3:20 per kilometer, surely it's a matter of time that I can hold that for 16:40 and run 5K in 16:40. It's only a matter of time. And this is the power of intervals. A lot of people, your typical runner, and I promise you, deal with a lot of runners. Your typical runner starting off in their running journey is just going out there 3-4 times a week. It's pretty ad hoc. They enjoy it, and hopefully they learn to enjoy it a little bit more, and then they look for some kind of structure. Most runners, even those that are running marathons, most runners have not experimented with interval training. The power of interval training is incredible. If you have not tapped into that area of your game right now, then it's a whole new world in terms of running. And a lot of these comments that I get are often very much kind of, you're delusional, or you're kind of over-optimistic, or that's true for you, but it's not true for anybody else. How true is that type of comment for most of the world? Whether it's somebody who's kind of looking up at somebody who's rich and saying, well, it's okay for you to say that because your dad was rich, or it's okay for you to say that because whatever. People love to make excuses to justify why they are not where they really want to be. I totally understand that. But if you're new to running and you're unlocking the power of intervals, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I can run so much faster if I just break this up into 400-meter repeats, 600-meter repeats, kilometer repeats, I can run way faster. It opens doors for you. What then happens if you put speed and strength together, coupled together? What does that mean? If I'm working on my glute strength, if I'm working on my hamstring strength and my quad strength and robust lower legs, how does that affect my speed? Just those two together takes you from a race pace of 20 minutes for 5K, 40 minutes for 10K, way, way faster for your intervals, and then more doors are opened. Incredibly important. Speed and strength, really important combination. What about if you've never experimented with structure? Most people have not worked with structure before. They've not worked with periodization of a training schedule. They've not looked at, oh, maybe I need to do a long run and build endurance, and then maybe one of my runs needs to be faster, and then it's the interval session and a long run. They're just going out ad hoc and running maybe 5-6 kilometers, 3-4 miles, whenever it suits them, and then they get the bug, and then they want to sort of look at other avenues. If you get an athlete at that point in their career where they've not opened any of the other doors and they're still kind of thinking that this is the limit because that's all they can see and that's all they can feel. When they go out and run, they know how hard it is to do 6-minute pace per kilometer. They know how hard it is to try to go a bit faster and they can maybe break 5:30 for a kilometer. So how would 4-minute pace for 5K actually be a possibility when they've not tapped into intervals and when they've not seen what strength can do to intervals? It's a case of mindset, yeah, and there's going to be physical limits there and physiological limitations. Of course there is. But to say, for example, that a sub-3 hour marathon is not possible for any man, it's ludicrous because it absolutely is. Now, your starting point might be different. Your starting point might have been you've been sat on the sofa eating hamburgers for the last 30 years, and now you're going to get into running and you're 100 kilograms overweight. That's a different starting point to a guy who's been sort of he's 22 years old, he's been playing football for the last 12 years. That's a different starting point. Both of those people are going to take a different amount of time to get to where they need to get to for that sub-3 marathon. Exactly the same with 5K. 15 minutes is not possible for most people before they've even considered it. And of course, there's physical barriers and there's physiological barriers, but is it possible for everybody? Maybe. Now, is it possible to run a 20-minute? There's got to be a point where we can agree, where we can say, oh, actually, it is possible for any man to run a sub-10-minute mile. Most people can agree with that. If you train towards a 10-minute mile, we can agree with that. Where does it stop? Is it possible for any man to run a mile in 8 minutes? Is it possible for any man to run a mile in 6 minutes? Where do we have to stop that? I think it's something like 5:30. If you can run a mile in 5:30, you can run a marathon in 3 hours. Who made that connection? And what relevance does it have to you going hard for 3 hours running a mile? It's a bit like Yasso's 800s, 8 times 800 meters. You take the average and that's around about your marathon time. Is it accurate? No, it's not. And we know those things now, but we refuse to accept that it's not true because we don't want to believe that we are capable of more. And that's the key point. So when you're looking, initially you're kind of running 25, 26, 27 minutes for park run, then as far as you can see, you may be able to get towards, one day you might be able to get towards 22 minutes or 20 minutes. You're not even thinking 40% down the track to a sub 15 or 15 minutes. Is it possible? Absolutely, it may be. So you've got to unravel the layers of training and being coached and going seeing the right knowledgeable people in order to unlock that, to see where your potential possibly lies. If you look at the marathon, if your current marathon is 3 hours 30 and you've just got into running, so let's say you've been running 12 to 18 months and you've run a 3 hour 30, which is a great time. If you've never considered structure, so you've never done interval sessions, you've never done long run before, you're just going out there 4 times a week, you're pretty consistent because you're disciplined and you like to perform well on race day, you've not considered structure. Would it be crazy to say that you could be able to improve 10% this year and then 10% over the first 12 months and then 10% over the second 12 months? Would that be crazy? That would take you from a 3 hour 30 marathon, 10% would be 180, 210 minutes, 21 minutes is 309. So it'd take you from 3:30 to 3:09 for the marathon. And then if we did 189 minutes, 3 hours 9, and did 10% faster than that, then what would we be looking at? So that would take us to a 250. So all of a sudden we've improved 40 minutes, which is unfathomable for most people. You're a 3 hour 30 marathon runner. You should be aiming for 3:25. You should be aiming for 3:20 if you've just started. People like to set limiting beliefs for themselves and other people because they are not capable of what they think they should be capable of because they're not willing to risk it. And that's another key point. If you're willing to set ambitious goals and go for it, it's a secret weapon because you're never going to lose. You're never going to fail. You're only going to win or learn. It's just going to be a crazy gamble that comes off. Of course, you've got to execute the training to put yourself in a really good place, but it's going to be a crazy gamble that comes off and you actually get that time. Many times that's happened to me in the marathon. Or you're going to succeed for a number of miles or a number of kilometers. So maybe you come away and you have to step off the track at 28 kilometers, but you were on pace for that 2:48 marathon. Exactly the same with a 5K, but you get more opportunities. Again, periodization. Often speak to runners who are going out every Saturday running park run as fast as they possibly can. What about if they tried to run fast every 3 weeks? What would happen then? They put training together for 3 weeks and then really went for it that third week. How would that change? If we look at all the components, there's maybe 15 different components. You are just scratching the surface.